Hello and welcome to Faux News. I'm your host, Bo Hughes. Were the purported double tap boat strikes off the coast of Venezuela in September a war crime? Should Secretary of War Pete Hegseth resign? And or should Admiral Frank Bradley be court-martialed for war crimes? Today we take a look at all this.
I think it's, to me, amazing that anybody in the public accepts this. The idea that we would make an accusation, we will simply accuse someone, and then they are found guilty without any kind of process. We asked the Coast Guard for specific statistics off the coast of Venezuela, and they said of boats that have been interceded off of the coast before we came up with this blow them to smithereens policy, we used to interdict them. And of the boats that we interdicted off the coast of Venezuela, about 1 in 4, 21% to be exact, were not carrying drugs.
The reason why there is so much debate and argument over the legality of these boat strikes is because they are unprecedented in two key ways. The first way is that in the past, the Coast Guard and law enforcement agencies have been primarily the bodies that have dealt with drug runners and traffickers, and they have done so within the territorial waters of the United States or at the request and collaboration of other governments requesting U.S. intervention and help in combating drugs. What we have here, obviously, is the U.S. Navy and at this point the Marines, because they're also down in the Caribbean, involved in large scale direct confrontation with these alleged drug runners and cartels. That we have really never seen before. So that presents a high ambiguity here because it's unprecedented. The second thing that we haven't seen before is the implementation of these drone strikes when in terms of using them to fight cartels or in drug intervention matters. We haven't seen that before either, and the current legal code on law of the high seas, like the UN code on laws of the seas, all of these things need to be updated because they're completely lacking in any sort of mention of drone warfare or anything like that. Because that the one that was just mentioned was established in 1982, and those things really didn't even exist at that point. So those are two of the problems with the current argument, and it'll be interesting to see how this gets fleshed out and what the consensus at the end of it all is. Um, Another element that's really introducing this gray area here is, and this of course was intentional by the Trump administration because they knew that it gave them a lot more latitude in how they wanted to go after these cartels, was that they labeled them terrorists, this term narco-terrorists. Post 9/11, as we all know, there was a lot of legislation passed, the Patriot Act, numerous other things that gave the government a lot more power and leverage in both going after and prosecuting people that they were, if they could call them a terrorist. So all these three factors combined present an unprecedented and very ambiguous situation that is probably going to end up in a court somewhere. And it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And at the end of it, there will be a consensus that going forward will kind of lay the groundwork for a legal precedent for things going forward. Um, in some ways, I think that's a good thing. The level at which drone warfare is going to be, we've seen this in Ukraine. That was really when it came to the high attention of the world. The level which drone warfare is going to become front and center in any sort of combat intervention or even law enforcement intervention, it already is something that is very lacking in official protocols, laws, things on the books of an official nature. And that's something that they need to work on and update so that everyone knows what the rules of engagement are and so that everything is very clear. They have not kept up with the pace of technology. Um, so going from there, there's also the added sublayer of all of this, in that Venezuela, one could argue, or Mexico, or any other country that has a high level of purported drug activity, if they're not addressing that themselves at a national level, uh, one can interpret the law, therefore, that there's I don't want to say a loophole there, but let's say an opportunity for an actor to come in, a state actor to come in and address what they are neglecting to address. Um, and we see that in this current situation. We will have to pay attention to the what they want to say about the chain of command based on the congressional testimony that was yesterday on Thursday by Frank Bradley and the release of this footage to people in Congress of this alleged double tap boat strike. It appears what they're saying is that Bradley is the one that officially ordered the second strike, that it was carried out a lengthy time after the initial strike, where you had a situation where there were survivors clinging to an overturned drug boat, and they decided after some length of time to hit the boat again because they were afraid that the drugs could be recovered by another smuggler, someone that would come and help them, and that these purported narco terrorists could then be also picked up and recovered. Um, so those are the claims that are coming out right now in directly as it relates to the footage from the September 2nd strike.
First of all, we need to be clear. There was no fog of war. They had a clear vision of these two people on top of what was left of their capsized boat for quite a while. I think it was somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour after the initial strike. So they could see clearly what was going on. First. Second, I saw Senator Cotton say that the two gentlemen were trying to turn their boat back up, I guess. That is patently ridiculous. That boat wasn't going anywhere. And by the way, that's not the justification that Admiral Bradley even offered. So it's two people sitting on a tiny little portion of a boat sticking out of the water that's capsized.
I know myself, I am becoming increasingly exhausted with the Trump administration and its way of doing business, and I am far from alone in that. There's been way too much shoot from the hip and sort of make things up as we go along. Going all the way back, of course, the best example is Liberation Day in the Rose Garden, where we pretty much just pulled tariff numbers out of our ass to restructure the global economy and then try to negotiate trade deals from there. Um, this current situation, I think, could have been completely avoided if there had not been a similar cowboy mentality applied. I think if the military had gone about this without the use of drones from the offset and captured even half a dozen of these boats, taken the people into captivity. What you do with them from there, of course, that presents a problem because obviously they're citizens of other countries, and that's where this notion of, well, if these countries aren't doing what is their implied responsibility to do, which is combat illegal drug running, then the U.S. or other countries are entitled to do so, particularly in international waters. Um, you take them into custody, and whether they're tried in a military court or whatever, you figure that out at the time. But and if because if you did that, you could project to the world, to the public, hey, look, we've already captured half a dozen different boats. This is how many kilos of coke or fentanyl, whatever is on this boat. These people are clearly running drugs. Here is the evidence. It's right here. You can't deny it. And we took them alive. We followed the official international law in doing this, drug interdiction types of laws, and just lay it out to people. And I think people would have been far more receptive to the idea of, let's say, an escalation in tactics and aggressive tactics in going after some of this drug running if you could even prove with some concrete evidence to the public that that's actually what's even going on here, that these aren't just fishermen, or um, or even in a small subset of the cases. Obviously, you don't need to show your entire hand. The people that you informants or whoever that you might have in these countries that are telling you these are drug boats, that's not what we're asking for. We're talking about after the fact uh, evidence, after you have done things in the legal traditional manner of a drug interdiction on the high seas, presenting to the public what your evidence is, and you go from there. And they haven't done that. They've just taken this, like I said, this cowboy approach that they're taking to really everything, the tariffs being the next best example, I think. Um, that's a whole nother topic, rabbit hole, but I mean, you're constantly swinging the pendulum on these tariffs. People that are in business and import and export things from around the world, they have to be able to make business plans. You can't just announce on Monday that it's something and then reduce it or increase it by 30 percentage points on Thursday. That just doesn't work. You're going to make people sit on their money and not invest it, and really undermine the economy probably doing that. But so it's interesting, of course, that they proceeded to carry out these strikes. There was a strike yesterday in the Pacific. I'm assuming that one was off the coast of Colombia. Um, and it really irritates me that they did not go about things in a far more legal, traditional, trying to be conscious of the world's perception to this way from the beginning, because in a big picture level, my viewpoint on this is that we are decades past the point at which we should have become far more aggressive in combating drugs, um, to the point of not just involving the Coast Guard, but let's call it our whole hardcore military apparatus. They have destroyed the inner cities of America for 60 years, caused who knows, millions of deaths, destroyed lives, destroyed families. It is a huge problem. It has been for over half of a century. And when you look at the big picture of what could have been the forces and efforts that could have been applied to it, it's a drop in the bucket of what they could have and probably should have done to combat this. And it's very nice in some ways. I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt that indeed these are drug boats. That something is finally being done about it. But we need to make sure at first that, you know, these are drug runners. That's should be an obvious first thing. And I don't think we should trust the government so far as to just trust their word that some random speedboat out in the Caribbean is running drugs necessarily. So and of course, there's an interesting nuance to all of that, in that the evil CIA was, running drugs. They probably still are. They've always been knee deep in the drug trade, and maybe that's part of why they never really wanted to do much to combat it, because they've always used it to move their money around, to funnel their black ops, etc. That's also an element of this. I think that's all for today on this topic. And on that note, I mean, if it was done, and this is the problem with so many of these things, ICE is another example. If things are done in an appropriate above board fashion, then I'm on board with it. And one example of that is Mexico, by far, is the biggest culprit in all this drug running. It has been forever. I would be on, and the government down there is corrupt beyond belief. They don't do anything about it. It's all hot air. They just do as much as they can, as little as they can get away with doing without severe economic sanctions or us putting boots on the ground and going down there and doing something about it ourselves. I would be on board. Again, you would have to come up with a good plan and do things the right way, but on board going down there directly militarily in their territory and doing something about it, because they refuse to do anything about it. And that's not right. Okay, we'll clean it up for you if you can't clean up your own backyard. But the huge asterisk next to all of that is it has to be done in the right way, and that, particularly with this current administration, I think, is a huge if, and I unfortunately I'm not overly um, optimistic, let's say, that that would be the case. We can talk about that some other time. I think that's all for today. I don't know if there are going to be more congressional hearings. I will pay attention to that and maybe do a follow-up video. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. As always, it's not fake news, it's faux news.